course, the biggest news today is that astonishing U-turn from the government, although we don't know how large a U-turn it is on the winter fuel allowance.
Well, we can go live to Durham now and speak to GB News viewer and homelessness volunteer Anita Atkinson about this proposed U-turn on the winter fuel allowance. Anita, thank you so much for joining us. What was your reaction when you heard the news that actually this fuel allowance might be restored to some pensioners?
I couldn't believe it. I can't believe that he's done such a huge U-turn. And is it just a reaction to what happened in the local government elections? Because, of course, I'm in County Durham, which has been forever and a day Labour, is now run by an overwhelming majority of Reform. So is that what it is? I mean, fantastic news, but why?
Well, of course, the Prime Minister says that this is because he's got the economy rearing again. He says that after just 9 months in office, the economy is in such a better position that he can reverse one of his biggest, or at least most known about, cuts. Do you believe him?
No, I don't believe a single word that comes out of his mouth. In fact, I don't believe a single word that comes out of the mouth of any politician at this moment, because he's doing a U-turn. It'll be a double U-turn before long. And it's just an absolute nonsense. It's a nonsense. They were only talking this morning about taxing your savings, and that'll include pensioners as well, of course, who've saved for a rainy day, probably to help their children and their grandchildren, and now they're going to give us the winter fuel allowance. Well, thank you very much. I'll believe it when I see it.
Anita, one of the arguments made for cutting the winter fuel allowance in the first place was that it's not means tested, and so even extremely wealthy pensioners get this fuel allowance every year, which they very clearly don't need. And although, of course, a lot of pensioners really struggle to pay their bills, there are also an awful lot of very wealthy pensioners. Would you agree with the idea of means testing it in principle, but maybe at a higher level than the £12,000-ish that it's currently set at?
Well, how much would it cost to do that? I mean, I understand that there are wealthy pensioners, and I know wealthy pensioners who are quite willing not to accept
well, it's going to cost to U-turn, so that we understand that this is exactly what they're going to do. They're going to raise the threshold from the 11,900 to some other amount. Now, that will be hugely costly. That is a form of means testing. So do you agree that that is the right way forward?
Well, it probably is, yes, actually. Yeah. There are plenty of pensioners who don't need it and who willingly say that. But it's the ones that do need it that worry me. The ones, we do have pensioners living on the streets because they can't afford to live in a house.
And that is an extraordinary state of affairs. But Anita, I suppose another question now arises after the government has said, well, we will U-turn on this and we will give more pensioners the winter fuel allowance, but they're not telling us who they will give the winter fuel allowance. I can imagine now many millions of pensioners in this country will be wondering, waiting, not able to budget properly for the next winter, not able to know if they're able to perhaps go on holiday this summer or not. Maybe they need to save the money because they don't know whether they'll be in this mysterious group of pensioners who may or may not now get a winter fuel allowance.
Yeah, and that's the question, isn't it? That's the question. It's all right doing this little tease, said, more pensioners are going to be eligible. Which pensioners are going to be eligible, and how are you going to sort out that eligibility? Who are they? Is it me? I have absolutely no idea. But you're right, because we don't know what to do with our money. Pensioners are careful anyway, because we have to be. But you're right. Can we afford that little trip to the seaside? We don't know.
And Anita, one of the arguments that was made for introducing the cut in the first place last summer was that the economy is in a difficult place. The country is in an enormous amount of debt. Taxes are very high, and working people as well as pensioners are really struggling to make ends meet. What do you think the answer is? What should the government do to put the economy back on a stable footing?
Well, I have absolutely no idea, because I've never worked in finance. I'm not a financial advisor, and I would never make one. I'm not very good at maths. That's for them to sort out, not just, when we talk about...
One of the arguments, though, Anita, would be that the government is going to have to cut spending. There just isn't any way around that, because our debt increases and increases every year. and it will get to the point of crisis. So if the government shouldn't cut winter fuel allowance, what should it cut?
Got absolutely no idea. I have no idea. That's why we have civil servants that run the country. We have MPs. They don't really run the country. We've got the civil servants. They're the ones that are paid highly to sort these things out. I have absolutely no idea what they can cut any further. No idea at all. That's not for me to say.
I think it'll be interesting to see what proposals we get from various politicians. I can imagine some people might have relatively high up their list. Perhaps migrant hotels would be near the top. But this came almost out of the blue today.
It did. There was indications we're going there. The Guardian wrote the story a couple of weeks ago saying a review is happening. Last Friday, the Independent, Keir Donaldson, their political editor, talked about it. And the quote's there from the Prime Minister, when we asked about it in Albania, he talked in the past tense. We did that for these reasons, and you heard there the justification on the so-called run the pound, which never happened and may not happen now either, by the way. Let's move on from that. It has caused, it's like a fox entering a hen house. It's just caused chaos at PMQs. I don't think Kemi Badenoch really heard what the PM announced.
Yes.
To a planted question from Sarah Owen MP. So it clearly was an arranged exchange here to tell the world. Sarah Owen MP asked about it. The PM gave the response. That's how, correctly announcing to Parliament first, but I'm not sure the rest of the people involved in PMQs listened to it, because Kemi Badenoch then asked, will you do it? We heard Ed Davey saying, will you go the whole hog and reverse the whole idea of it? In the briefing just moments ago with with Kemi Badenoch's team, and it's not clear what their policy is. They wouldn't have done it, but would you reverse it? They won't say. Yes, exactly. Your eyes are narrowing, Tom.
I cannot possibly comprehend why the Conservative Party would not just be supportive.
They won't write budgets now. We're going to hear from Kemi Badenoch shortly.
This is the nuts Kemi Badenoch policy of never announcing anything until about 5 minutes before the next general election.
So their position is that they wouldn't have done it, and they urge the government to reverse it, but they won't say if they'll reverse it, if you see what I mean. Are you clear on that, Miriam? It's your old job in the old days.
Point out at the time that it was a daft thing to be against it, because everybody knows that a future government is going to have to come up with some sort of reform of pensions altogether, because we can't afford them long term. But nevertheless, sometimes governments change their minds in response to new evidence, or because
which is what the government might say that.
But really, we know this is a purely political decision based on popularity and particularly pressure from backbenchers. Is this the end of Keir Starmer's backbone?
His backbone. I think, as you were saying earlier, when you start U-turning, where do you stop? Correctly saying that, of course, both of you. Yes, the May the 1st elections were a big deal. They lost that 14,000 majority in Runcorn and Helsby by 4 votes to Reform UK. They lost 2/3 of their council seats, the government. Only 99 Labour councillors returned. That's the context. And here's the reaction. What might happen? Well, currently it's means tested. So if you earn in income more than £11,809, you don't get it if you're a single person. Will that be lifted to 15,000, 20,000? And in which case, how many more pensioners will be caught by it? Or will it end it altogether, which is the win? I think if they play with the detail, it won't cut through. There's still going to be someone's granny who's getting cold.
That is very, very difficult then for the government to justify if they do the Ed Davey policy and just reverse it completely.
Yeah.
I mean, even David Cameron, in one of his first speeches from the House of Lords, as in his post-Foreign Secretary career, one of his first speeches was saying how the government got it wrong. There should be a means testing, but it shouldn't be in at that £11,000 level.
Yes.
I mean, it's going to be incredibly difficult for the government to justify not having just a higher threshold, and indeed giving it to people who the country would rightly see as sort of perhaps not needing it.
And people remember this. I remember when George Osborne removed child benefit. My first child had child benefit. We then didn't qualify after that, and that was annoying. I mean, the marriage tax allowance that you campaigned for, I'm sure you still do, Miriam, on that issue, that exists, but you have to fill in 80 pages of bump to get it, and people don't want...
Well, it's worth £250 a year. I mean, it's
people
less than the winter
it's
fuel
not really
allowance.
worth doing for a lot of people,
indeed.
even though that's a lot of money for some people, but others think it's not worth doing. So I think it's very complicated here. I think, yes, there's a U-turn, yes, they look weak, and I say the fox is in the hen house in Westminster, and everyone's going to work out how to respond to it.